versus substantive rule. So, procedure versus substantive. Procedural rules are like how the court governs things, the process of litigation, how it will be carried out in court. Um, so questions like who will get the first opening statement and how testimony will be introduced in evidence are procedural rules. Substantive rules, however, are what the outcome and consequences are supposed to flow from the facts found in proceeding. For example, when defendant commit the crime of burglary in the case of unauthorized breaking and entering into a building with the intent of committing a crime inside. So that is substantive. So it's like the outcome of the proceedings, and it determines who is guilty. Secondly, it determines the rights and the rights of individuals within the law system. So substantive is the procedure is the how, substantive is the what. However, the line between procedure and substantive can be blurred, because in procedural rules, it can some procedures can be outcome determinative. Like for example, who will get to have the first opening statement will gain the upper hand in court, because the jury already hanged on what the first person have to say, and it can determine what the outcome is and who is guilty. This is substantive in nature. However, there are cases that we need to draw a rigid distinction between substance and procedure in court. For example, in New York State, they place importance on penalty or statutory damages, and we get monetary compensation for the damages that we have. However, because of that implication, this is geared more toward individual enforcement, and class action is really hard to be able to apply it in this two type of damages, because it can magnify the liability out of all proportion, and that's what we call serious substantive implications. So in New York State, class action can only happen when the statute that create the penalty or statutory damages policy can authorizes that class action. However, in the federal court, they draw a rigid distinction between procedure and substance, because class action is purely procedural action. It's purely procedural, and it's under the Rule 23 of the Federal Rule of Civil Procedure, which is purely procedure. Class action can happen. So in the case of Sadie Grove vs Allstate Insurance, where a person get the damage of $500, in New York you cannot have class action. Remember, class action is when one person represent the whole lot of people, or like the group or the class that have been damaged and harmed by the defendant. So for example, the Allstate Insurance have caused damages of $500 to 5,000 people. So one person can be the representative. In this case, using lawyers as representative can get up to like a high class file of 5 million lawsuit. And this can have, because now the question here is, how can that not have like substantive implications? Because the outcome of this lawsuit is vastly different using class action, and class action is procedure. So because in the court, class action is under the procedure, you can use class action, but in New York State, class action is not really draw clear with substantive implications. You cannot use it in New York. So this is how distinction between substance and procedure is important, and it can also vary across states and in the US. Personally, I think that class action should be dealt with carefully, and because New York State is just a state, right? So um, I find that it is reasonable that class action should be dealt with carefully. But if the U.S. When like a whole class of people get suppressed, like for example in women's rights and in abortion cases, then you can use this class action with the whole federal, like in the federal court.